7 biblical prophecies for Israel that are about to be fulfilled. There are over 700 prophecies in the Bible. As of today, roughly 81% of them have already been fulfilled. Many of them centuries after they were written, down to exact dates, exact locations, and exact details that no human author could have predicted. You will be surprised when I share 7 specific biblical prophecies about Israel that have not yet been fulfilled, but that the conditions for are forming right now, in real time, in ways that previous generations never witnessed. Prophecy 1. The confirmation of a covenant with many. Let's begin where the prophetic timeline begins, with a covenant that hasn't been signed yet, but that the architecture for is already in place. Daniel 9:27. And he will enter into a binding and irrevocable covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will stop the sacrifice and grain offering for the remaining 3.5 years. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate even until the complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who causes the horror. Now let's unpack this carefully, because the details matter enormously. Daniel is describing a future leader, someone the angel Gabriel calls the prince who is to come, who will confirm a covenant with the many. The Hebrew text is specific. It doesn't say a few, it doesn't say some. It says the many. And the context makes clear this involves Israel and multiple nations in a binding agreement centered on peace and security. This covenant is for 1 week, and in Daniel's prophetic framework, as we've covered in previous videos, 1 week equals 7 years. So this is a 7-year binding agreement involving Israel and many nations, confirmed by a single authoritative leader. And here's what most people miss about this verse. The word translated confirm in the original Hebrew doesn't mean create. It means to strengthen, to make firm, to enforce something that already exists in some form. Whoever this leader is, he doesn't invent the peace framework from scratch. He takes something already in development and he makes it official, binding, and institutional. Now here's what makes this prophecy so urgent right now. And this connects directly to prophecy number 2 in a way that's going to shift your entire understanding of what's being built in the Middle East. Because Daniel 9:27 doesn't just describe a covenant, it describes what that covenant enables. And what it enables, the resumption of sacrifices and offerings in a temple, requires something that hasn't existed for nearly 2,000 years. The question isn't whether someone will eventually confirm a covenant with many involving Israel. The geopolitical machinery for that is already being assembled. The question is, what happens next? Because what Daniel says comes next is the rebuilding of something the Jewish people have been waiting for since 70 AD. Prophecy 2. The rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. This is the prophecy that turns everything from theoretical to tangible. Because here's what most people don't think through carefully enough. For Daniel 9:27 to be fulfilled, for the sacrifices to resume and then be stopped at the midpoint of the covenant, there has to be a place where those sacrifices are happening. There has to be a functioning temple. And right now, as you're watching this, there is no Jewish temple standing in Jerusalem. There hasn't been one for nearly 2,000 years. The Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD under General Titus. His legions surrounded Jerusalem, breached the walls, and systematically dismantled the temple stone by stone. Exactly as Jesus had prophesied in Matthew 24:2 when he told his disciples, "There shall not be left here one stone upon another, that shall not be thrown down." And since that destruction, No sacrifice has been offered in Jerusalem. No priestly service has been performed. No altar of burnt offering has functioned. No incense has risen from the holy place. The entire sacrificial system that defined Jewish worship for over 1,000 years has been completely dormant, frozen in time, for nearly 20 centuries. But here's what the Bible makes absolutely clear, and this is the part that should make your hands shake. A third temple must be rebuilt. Not might be, must be. Because multiple passages of Scripture describe events that can only occur inside a standing, functioning temple in Jerusalem during the end times. Daniel 9:27 assumes the existence of a temple where sacrifices and grain offerings are actively taking place before the midpoint of the covenant. You can't stop something that isn't happening. You can't desecrate a building that doesn't exist. The verse requires a temple. Matthew 24:15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Jesus says, the holy place, that's the inner sanctum of the temple. He's describing a specific location inside a specific building in Jerusalem. That building isn't standing right now, but Jesus spoke about it as though its future existence was certain. And then Revelation 11:1-2 removes all ambiguity. Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. John is told to measure a temple, a physical, standing, operational structure in Jerusalem, with an altar, with worshipers inside during the tribulation period. And notice the detail. The outer court is given to the Gentiles, but the inner temple belongs to God. This isn't metaphorical. John is measuring walls, rooms, and an altar. That temple does not exist today, but the preparations for it are further along than most Christians have any idea. And here's where this prophecy moves from ancient scripture into today's headlines. Because what I'm about to show you is not speculation. It's documented, it's photographed, it's funded, and it's happening right now in the heart of Jerusalem. The Temple Institute, founded in 1987 by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel and headquartered in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, just a short walk from the Western Wall, has spent over 37 years doing one thing: preparing for the Third Temple. Not studying it as a historical curiosity, preparing for it as an operational reality. And what they've accomplished is staggering. They have reconstructed over 70 sacred vessels required for temple worship, each one built to exact biblical specifications using the materials prescribed in the Torah. The golden menorah, the 7-branched lampstand described in Exodus 25, has been completed. It's covered in 95 pounds of pure gold and has a value exceeding $2 million. It's not a replica in a museum. It's built for use. The silver trumpets described in Numbers 10, the ones the priests would blow to assemble the people and signal the offerings, have been crafted and are ready. The table of showbread, the altar of incense, the sacrificial bowls, the knives, the copper and gold vessels, all of them have been made according to Torah specifications and are stored, waiting in Jerusalem. And it's not just the objects. The garments have been prepared too. The high priest's breastplate, the one bearing 12 precious stones, each representing a tribe of Israel, has been constructed. The ephod, the turban, the robe of blue, the sash, the linen undergarments. Every layer of the priestly wardrobe described in Exodus 28 has been woven, dyed, and assembled. The Temple Institute's director, Chaim Richman, has stated publicly, and I want you to hear this carefully, "We have enough in place now to resume divine service and to build the temple." That's not a prophecy scholar saying that. That's the director of the organization building the instruments saying we are ready. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. Because the vessels and garments are only part of the picture. You also need priests. And not just any priests. You need Levitical priests, descendants of Aaron, who are trained in the exact procedures of temple service that haven't been performed in 2,000 years. And the Temple Institute has been training them. Over 500 young men from the tribe of Levi have been identified through genealogical research and trained in sacrificial procedures, ritual practices, and temple protocols. A field school was built in Mitzpeh, Jericho, about a 20-minute drive from Jerusalem on the road to Jericho, specifically to prepare Kohanim and Levites for service in the Third Temple. They study the sacrificial system. They practice the rituals. They rehearse in replica temple structures. They know the procedures. And a Levitical choir has already been assembled. They've performed publicly at the southern wall of the Temple Mount, wearing Levitical uniforms and playing the silver trumpets, reproduced by the Temple Institute. This isn't theory. These are priests in training, wearing the garments, playing the instruments, practicing the worship, waiting for a temple that doesn't exist yet. And here's where this crosses the line from preparation into something that should genuinely alarm every prophecy watcher on earth. Because there's one more element required before temple service can resume. And it's the most controversial, the most difficult, and the most prophetically charged of all. The red heifer. Numbers 19:2. This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord hath commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. According to Jewish law, extrapolated from Numbers 19, and expanded in the Mishnah's tractate Para, a perfectly red heifer must be sacrificed and its ashes mixed with spring water to produce a purification solution. Without those ashes, the priests cannot be ritually purified. Without purified priests, no temple service can begin. Without temple service, the sacrifices Daniel describes cannot resume. The entire prophetic chain depends on this single, biologically rare animal. And the requirements are almost impossibly strict. The heifer must be completely red. The Mishnah states that even 2 black hairs disqualify it. It must be without blemish of any kind. It must never have been yoked or used for labor. It must be at least 2 years old. It must be sacrificed on the Mount of Olives while facing the site of the temple. And according to Jewish tradition, only 9 red heifers have been sacrificed in the entire history of Israel, from the time of Moses to the destruction of the Second Temple. The 10th, according to Maimonides, will be prepared in the days of the Messiah. Now, here's what happened. In September 2022, 5 red heifer candidates were transported from a ranch in Texas to Israel by a group called Bonei Israel, led by a man named Byron Stinson. These heifers were born in late 2021, and by November 2023, they had reached the age of eligibility for sacrifice. Rabbis initially examined them and found them potentially suitable. The news sent shockwaves through both the prophetic community and the Middle East. Hamas, and I need you to hear this, Hamas itself publicly acknowledged the red heifers as one of the provocations behind escalating tensions. A terrorist organization was tracking biblical prophecy. Think about that for a moment. But here's where the story gets even more complex. And this is the part almost nobody is reporting accurately. In August 2025, the Temple Institute confirmed that all 5 of the original Texas heifers had been disqualified. Some developed non-red hairs. One had a damaged tail. The strict requirements of the Mishnah rendered them invalid for the official ceremony. But, and this is critical, that wasn't the end of the story. In July 2025, Byron Stinson's group conducted a ceremony in the Sumerian mountains. One of the heifers, reportedly the most perfect of the group, was burned in what was described as a practice exercise. The Temple Institute later clarified that the ceremony was conducted in Samaria, not on the Mount of Olives, and therefore could not produce kosher ashes according to halakhic law. But Stinson and some rabbis involved maintain that the ceremony was more significant than a mere rehearsal, and that additional red heifer candidates are being raised on a piece of land on the Mount of Olives itself. The Temple Institute has since acknowledged that their efforts have gone underground. They've stated publicly that they now keep their preparations hidden, and they've admitted that when the next announcement comes, it may not be about searching for a red heifer, but about sacrificing one. The search hasn't stopped. The preparations haven't slowed. They've simply moved out of public view. And here's what you need to understand. And this is why I've spent this long on this prophecy. The temple doesn't need to be a grand, permanent structure to fulfill Daniel's prophecy. The Temple Institute's own scholars have acknowledged that a temporary altar can be erected on the Temple Mount, and sacrifices can begin even before a full temple is constructed. The Temple Institute posted a striking image of a wristwatch with the rebuilt temple on its face, with the message, "Synchronize your watches. It's time to build." Prophecy 3. The 144,000 sealed from Israel's tribes. This is one of the most debated, most misunderstood, and most hijacked prophecies in the entire book of Revelation. Multiple groups throughout history have tried to claim this passage for themselves, twisting its meaning, stripping its context, and redefining its terms to fit agendas that the text itself does not support. But when you actually read what Scripture says, carefully, precisely, and without imposing outside theology onto the words, what you find is one of the most stunning acts of divine protection ever described in the Bible. And it hasn't happened yet. But first, you need to understand where this prophecy sits in the timeline of Revelation, because its placement is not accidental. It's strategic. And when you see what comes immediately before and immediately after the sealing of the 144,000, you're going to understand why God pauses the entire sequence of end times judgment to mark these people before the horror begins. Revelation chapter 6 ends with the opening of the 6th seal, a moment so terrifying that the kings of the earth, the generals, the wealthy, the powerful, and every free person and slave on the planet hides in caves and begs the mountains to fall on them. The final words of chapter 6 are a question that echoes through the rest of the book. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Who can survive what's coming? Who can endure the judgment of the Lamb? And then, right there, between the 6th seal and the 7th, God stops everything. Before the 7th seal is opened, before the trumpet judgments begin, before the full weight of the tribulation descends on the earth, God hits pause. And in that pause, he sends an angel ascending from the east with the seal of the living God. And that angel cries out with a loud voice to the 4 angels who have been given power to harm the earth. Revelation 7:3, saying, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Do not harm the earth until my people are marked. Do not unleash the next wave of judgment until the ones who belong to me are protected." God literally halts the apocalyptic sequence to seal his servants first. And then, Scripture tells us exactly who those servants are. And the specificity is breathtaking. Revelation 7:4-8. "And I heard the number of them which were sealed. And there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Nephthalim were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zabulon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Now let me tell you why this passage is so much more detailed than most people realize. Because the text doesn't just say 144,000 from Israel. It names the tribes individually. It assigns an exact number to each one. It provides a list that you can count, verify, and cross-reference against every other tribal list in the Bible. And when you do that, when you actually compare this list to the more than 20 different arrangements of the 12 tribes found throughout the Old Testament, you discover something remarkable. This list is unique. It matches no other tribal listing in all of Scripture. Judah is named first, not Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, as you'd expect. Why? Because Jesus, the Messiah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, descends from that tribe. Revelation 5:5 already established this. "Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed." The list places the tribe of the Messiah at the head. That's not a coincidence. That's a theological statement embedded in the structure of the list itself. Levi is included, which is unusual because in most Old Testament tribal lists, Levi is excluded since the Levites didn't receive a territorial inheritance in the Promised Land. Their inheritance was the Lord Himself. But in this list, Levi is present because this isn't about land. It's about service. These 144,000 are sealed not for territorial possession, but for divine mission during the tribulation. And the inclusion of Levi, the priestly tribe, signals that this mission carries a sacred, worship-centered dimension. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. And this is the detail that has generated centuries of debate and that connects directly to one of the darkest chapters in Israel's history. One tribe is missing. The tribe of Dan is nowhere on this list. 12 tribes are named, 12,000 from each. But Dan, one of the original 12 sons of Jacob, is conspicuously absent. In his place, the list includes both Joseph and his son Manasseh, which is unusual since Joseph's inheritance was typically divided between his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Including both Joseph and Manasseh while excluding Dan is a deliberate restructuring. Something disqualified Dan, and the Bible gives us enough evidence to understand what that something was. The history of Dan's idolatry is one of the most troubling narratives in all of Scripture. It begins in Judges chapter 18, when the people of Dan, dissatisfied with their allotted territory near the Mediterranean, sent spies northward, discovered a peaceful community, slaughtered them, seized their land, and established their own city, which they named Dan. But that wasn't the worst of it. They also set up a carved image and established a rogue priesthood, creating the first organized center of idol worship in Israel's history. Judges 18:30-31 records that this idolatry persisted all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. While God's tabernacle stood in one place, Dan's idol stood in another. It was a direct, sustained rebellion against the worship of the true God. And it got worse. Centuries later, when the kingdom of Israel split under Jeroboam I, 2 golden calves were erected as alternative worship centers to prevent the northern tribes from traveling to Jerusalem. And where did Jeroboam place one of those calves? Daniel. 1 Kings 12:28-30 records that Jeroboam set up a golden calf in Bethel and another in Dan. And the text says explicitly, "And this thing became a sin." Dan became synonymous with apostasy. It was the city where Israel's covenant with God was most visibly, most persistently, and most institutionally violated. Now, let me address something directly. Because if I don't, I'm not being honest with you. Throughout history, multiple groups have claimed to be the 144,000. The Jehovah's Witnesses teach that the 144,000 represents a fixed number of anointed believers who will rule in heaven, and that this number was essentially filled by 1935. Other groups, sects, and movements have adopted the title for themselves, but the text is emphatic. These are from all the tribes of the children of Israel. The Greek word for tribes here, phyle, refers to ethnic genealogical lineage. These are not Gentile converts. These are not members of a denomination. These are Jewish men from specific, identifiable tribal bloodlines. Bloodlines that today only God Himself can fully trace. And here's what makes that point so powerful. Because after the Babylonian exile, after the Assyrian dispersion of the northern tribes, after 2,000 years of diaspora, most Jewish people alive today cannot identify which tribe they descend from with certainty. The tribe of Levi can sometimes be traced through surnames like Cohen and Levi. The tribe of Judah and Benjamin were preserved through the southern kingdom. But the other tribes? They're scattered. They're intermixed. Their genealogical records were largely destroyed when the temple fell in 70 AD. And yet God says He will seal 12,000 from each tribe. Which means God knows. When no human genealogist on earth can trace these lines, God has preserved the records. He knows who belongs to whom. And when the time comes, He will find them, seal them, and protect them from every tribe, by name, by number, by ancestry. So what do these 144,000 actually do once they're sealed? Revelation 14 gives us their destiny, and it's extraordinary. Revelation 14:1. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. They stand with the Lamb on Mount Zion, not in heaven, on Zion, in Jerusalem, with Jesus. Their foreheads bear the name of God and the name of the Father, a visible divine mark of ownership that contrasts directly with the mark of the beast that Revelation 13 describes. One mark belongs to God, the other belongs to the Antichrist. And during the tribulation, every person on earth will bear one or the other. The 144,000 wear God's seal proudly, and they survive. Revelation 14:3. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. A song that only they can learn. A worship experience so unique, so specific to what they've endured and witnessed, that no one else in the history of creation can replicate it. Whatever these 144,000 go through during the tribulation produces a depth of worship that is literally exclusive to them. Think about what that means. Their suffering, their faithfulness, their mission during the darkest period in human history earns them a form of praise that belongs to them alone. That's not just protection, that's consecration. Revelation 14:4-5. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. They are celibate, wholly devoted, undivided in their consecration. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Total obedience, total surrender, no hesitation. They are first fruits, a term deeply rooted in the Old Testament harvest system, where the first portion of the crop was offered to God before the rest was gathered. The 144,000 are the first portion of redeemed Israel, the initial harvest that signals a much larger ingathering to come. And that larger ingathering, the national conversion of all Israel, is itself a prophecy we'll reach later in this video. And when you see how these two connect, you're going to understand that the 144,000 aren't just protected individuals. They're the down payment on a promise God made to Abraham 4,000 years ago. And there's one more detail that most people overlook entirely. The concept of sealing in Revelation isn't new. It has an Old Testament precedent that makes the 144,000 even more significant. In Ezekiel chapter 9, God sends a man clothed in linen through Jerusalem with a writer's inkhorn. His instructions? Go through the city and set a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over the abominations being committed in Jerusalem. And after the marking, everyone without the mark is killed. The pattern is identical. God marks his faithful remnant before judgment falls, and those who bear the mark are spared. What Ezekiel saw in vision, Revelation describes in prophetic fulfillment. The seal of God isn't a metaphor. It's a pattern that God established centuries before Revelation was written, and it will be executed again during the tribulation with exact numerical precision. And here's what's critical to understand. Because this connects directly to the next prophecy in a way that will make your blood run cold. The 144,000 are sealed before the tribulation reaches its worst point. They are protected before the abomination occurs, which means God knows what's coming, and he marks his people before the horror arrives. The sealing is not reactive, it's preemptive. God doesn't wait for the crisis to begin and then scramble to protect his own. He stops the entire sequence of judgment, seals his servants, and then allows the next phase to unfold. That's the kind of God we serve. A God who is always one step ahead of the enemy and always right on time for his people. And what arrives next, according to Jesus himself, is the single most terrible event in the entire prophetic timeline. An event that happens inside the very temple we just described in prophecy number 2. An event so appalling, so blasphemous, so horrifying that Jesus told his followers not to pray, not to pack, not to prepare, just run. And the infrastructure for that event is being built right now. Prophecy 4. The abomination of desolation in the temple. This is the prophecy Jesus personally warned about, not through a parable, not through a metaphor. He named it directly, pointed his disciples to Daniel, and told them exactly what to do when it happens. And the urgency in his voice, preserved across 2,000 years of Scripture, should terrify anyone who takes Bible prophecy seriously. Matthew 24:15-16. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Jesus doesn't say pray about it. He doesn't say wait for confirmation. He doesn't say consult your pastor. He says, when you see it, flee. Drop everything and run. That's how severe this event is. So what is it? Daniel describes it in multiple passages. Daniel 9:27 tells us that in the middle of the 7-year covenant, the same leader who confirmed the agreement will break it. He will stop the sacrifices and offerings, the very worship that the rebuilt temple was enabling, and will set up something so profane, so blasphemous, that Daniel calls it an abomination that makes desolate. Daniel 11:31. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Daniel 12:11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And then Paul gives us the most explicit description of what this figure actually does inside the temple. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. Let no one in any way deceive or entrap you, for that day will not come unless the apostasy comes first. That is, the great rebellion, the abandonment of the faith by professed Christians, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, the Antichrist, the one who is destined to be destroyed, who opposes and exalts himself so proudly and so insolently above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he actually enters and takes his seat in the temple of God, publicly proclaiming that he himself is God. He sits in the temple. He declares himself God. He demands worship. And this isn't symbolic. Paul describes it as a physical act in a physical location. The temple of God in Jerusalem. The same temple that hasn't been rebuilt yet. The same temple whose sacred vessels are already being prepared. The same temple whose purification requires red heifers that are already in Israel. Now this event has a historical foreshadowing that makes the prophecy even more chilling. In 167 BC, the Greek ruler Antiochus IV Epiphanes invaded Jerusalem, desecrated the temple, erected an altar to Zeus on the altar of burnt offering, and sacrificed a pig inside the holy place. That event, recorded in the books of Maccabees, was devastating to the Jewish people. But Daniel and Jesus both indicate that what Antiochus did was only a preview. The real abomination of desolation is still coming, and it will be worse than anything Antiochus imagined. Daniel 12:11 tells us that from the moment the abomination is set up, there will be 1,290 days, roughly 3.5 years, of desolation